Hi everyone, thank you for joining today's webinar. My name is Sonia Siddiqui and joining us today is Anna Moaz. Hi Anna.
Hi there.
So we're very happy to have Anna on board to do a webinar with us today, and her topic is super interesting, and I know that everyone will be able to gain a lot from what she has to say. But before we go in, I just want to make sure that everyone is properly connected. So please know that you are all on listen only mode, so we will not be able to hear you. So if you're trying to talk right now, we will probably not hear you at all, but Anna will take questions towards the end of the presentation. So please type in the questions into the questions tab. There's a Q&A tab that you can type your questions into, and Anna will take them after the presentation. And for best results, please use a laptop or a desktop computer. Mobile devices such as cell phones or tablets probably will not give you the full functionality of the webinar. And to tell you a little bit about ACCES, we've been around for over 30 years helping job seekers such as yourselves. We work with over 2,200 employers. We have over 30 different programs, which include our sector-specific bridging programs. We've got programs for youth, programs for women, for leadership, entrepreneurship. Check out our website, everything's on there. We've got 6 locations in the GTA with our new 7th location that's going to be opening in Newmarket. So keep an eye out for that as well. We've got 3 national programs and online services such as the webinars we bring to you. And we also do virtual open houses and virtual job fairs as well, and virtual speed mentoring. So I'm going to hand it over to Anna now to introduce herself and lead right into the presentation.
Awesome, thank you for that. So hi everyone, I'm Anna. I'm the Senior Recruitment Consultant at Scotiabank, and I actually started with Scotiabank a little over 2 years ago. I first started recruiting for the retail branches across the GTA, and I had done that for about a year. I did a lot of hiring for financial advisors, senior financial advisors, small business advisors, customer reps, so all of those roles that you see in the branch. And actually in that first year, I worked a lot with ACCES. I actually went to some of their, did some presentations at their office in Brampton and chatted with a lot of individuals as part of their financial services program as well. So I thought this would be a great opportunity. So now I actually recruit for the commercial banking opportunities in Scotiabank. Again, very sales focused, very client facing, and very results driven. Of course, a lot of scorecards, metrics, things like that, having that COI network, center of influences, getting leads, a lot of those types of roles. So I came across a lot of applications from new immigrants, and I noticed that there's a lot of differences, I guess, in terms of expectations when it comes to resume. So I thought this would be a great opportunity for not just my own applicants, but for people as a whole that are new or just want to get a better idea of what a good resume could look like. So I'm gonna stop my video and I'll be sharing my screen for the presentation. It is my first webinar, so forgive me if I'm talking too fast. And of course, I definitely want to take a lot of questions at the end. This time is really for you guys and for you guys to share any questions or concerns that you may have. And I figured the resume aspect is a great topic because it's very subjective. So I might tell you one thing, you might go to someone else, they might tell you something else. So this is really, in my experience, what works best. Sorry, just sharing my screen. So I'm just going to wait a moment. I believe you guys should be able to see. So again, perfect. So the ultimate guide to professional sales resumes. I didn't want to be too specific. I figured a sales profile would be the best, and just really learning how to create impact. So this is sort of our agenda items for the day. So we'll discuss the resume format, some of the key points in a resume, common challenges for new immigrants, the do's and don'ts, and just additional quick tips. Honestly, the tips aren't necessarily so specific to a resume, or just it may be more towards the application process as a whole. And of course, we'll open it up to Q&A. I know we have about an hour's time. I'm pretty sure I'll be a lot shorter than that, and hopefully we can utilize a lot of the time for your questions as well. So starting off with the resume format, I'll show an example in the next slide too, but like I said, there's no real set template. Everyone has their own perspective of what comes first. Should we put education on the top? Do we put education at the bottom? Do we put experience first? How do you do it? So of course that, like I said, the topic can be very subjective, but the most important traits are really making sure you have your full name there, ensuring you have an accurate contact number and email address. I wouldn't recommend adding a home address or additional personal information. You don't need to put in what your marital status or PR status, anything like that. Do not add that in. It's not necessary. The beauty of our job market as a whole is to refrain from anything that could potentially cause a bias, right? So male, female, doesn't matter. You put in whatever's only really mandatory. Sometimes I would say it's important to put in just a city maybe. And the reason why I say that is because, for example, I could be recruiting for the same role across various geographical areas. So Mississauga, Markham, Brampton, etc. So if you put in, let's say at least Toronto, Ontario, I know you're usually mobile across the GTA or whichever city you're in. That sometimes helps, but you don't need to put like a home address. And again, it's up to you. I sometimes still add it depending on the type of role. I mean, if I'm applying internally at Scotiabank, they already know where I live, right? So it's not really a big deal from there. Also, ensuring your work experience really starts from the most recent. So making sure the first thing that a recruiter looks at is your current role / most recent role. And obviously adding the most applicable points to your work experience. Really think about, okay, if I'm applying to this sales role, do they care that I use Excel? Yes, you might need to track different things. Do they care that, I worked as a cashier years ago? Probably not, right? So really wanting to make sure that you're putting in points, even in terms of the experience, that it's applicable. If you did any people management, if you had people reporting to you, what were your scores like? What were your metrics like? Did you have to get leads on your own? Were you part of any special projects? So did you win even any awards, right? So definitely adding that piece in. Very, very important to add in your correct start and end dates. I like when people put in the month and the years. So for example, starting March 2019 till current, or March 2018 till February 2020, whatever the case is. So really making sure those dates are correct, because that goes a long way. Even less if you do get the role, you have to submit, let's say, your background checks, really making sure it matches up. We don't want any type of red flags from the recruiter's end, right? We might be like, oh, why did you put in a different date? Of course, it's off by a month or so. That's not a big deal, but really just overall ensuring that it's accurate as it can be. As well as education. So you really want to make sure that if you did complete something, you put that in. If you did not complete something, you just want to be honest, right? So I've had people that completed some courses, but they did not complete the program. So I would recommend making sure you put in, taken, again, not in this particular wording, but basically saying you've taken courses at XYZ college versus completed XYZ program at the college. So making sure that that's accurate, putting in the completion date. Let's say you're currently in a program, then put in the expected completion date and say that it's expected. Don't say that it is completed. Obviously, if it's a future year, that makes sense. We understand it's in progress as well. And like I said, if it's a sales role, you want to look at, what do people want to see, right? You're hitting goals, you're hitting targets, you're going above and beyond. What are you doing? So really adding those metrics, key accomplishments. So, did you win any awards? Were there any competitions you were part of? Were you part of any additional committees or organizations? What were you doing in your role and outside of your role? What did you do to really go above and beyond? So here's an example. I kind of, this is obviously not my real resume, but just kind of show you a general clean template of what I like to see on a resume, nothing fancy. Again, some people nowadays have really cool new resume formats. Definitely do what you think is best. I've seen people, whether they're from here or not, they add their photos. I wouldn't recommend that. Again, bias. I think it's just better to keep it, just your name and what's actually important versus, how you look, right? So I like to add my name, telephone number, email address. So I put in education at the top over here. So of course, people are different. I've had some people where they have the name, below it they would write, for example, CPA, CFA, MBA, whatever their accreditations are. And then in the education at the they would put education at the very bottom then. So like I said, very subjective, depends on you. In this case, I did not add any accreditations under my name before my contact info. I just left it as is, put in education at the top. So for example, Ryerson University, MBA, highest level of education first. So let's say that was completed 2016. So as well as my Bachelor of Commerce, University of Toronto, Mississauga, Ontario, 2013. I'd like to add the locations for this. Again, not necessarily mandatory. These are universities that most people around here know of. I would recommend if you did complete it from a different country, you would just put in the country name. You don't need to necessarily put in the city name. But of course, putting in exact Master of Business Administration, okay, Bachelor of Commerce, major in Human Resources. If you had a minor, I would recommend adding that in. As you can see over here, expected completion. So we don't want to make it sound like we've already completed this by saying CFA level 1, so we want to put this in, it's in progress, and the expected completion date is this. This way you're not necessarily held accountable, because let's say you have that phone interview and they ask you, so have you done it? You say no. They might say, why did you put that in just CFA level 1 and not the actual completion date? So of course, only put in education that you think is most applicable as well, or at least the highest level completed. If you feel like your education isn't necessarily applicable to the roles you're applying to, then leave that at the bottom. That's when I would put education at the very bottom over here, before additional skills. Someone, that maybe has just completed their undergrad and let's say in, again, Bachelor of Commerce, but they haven't done anything in addition to that. Again, I would probably just put the education more towards the bottom, because you probably have better work experience that you want to discuss. So here is the work experience part. So I put in the company name. As you can see, there's certain, areas that are bolded, certain areas that aren't. So just making sure it's neat and just making sure the indents are all correct as well overall. As you can see, there's some underlining over here. Please ignore that. It's not through Word. I actually have a additional, I forgot the name of it, but it's kind of like Grammarly, where it's kind of an additional tool that you add to your desktop, where it helps with, the grammar and spelling, etc. So that's why it's underlined over here, but you want to make sure that doesn't happen for you. So this is the company name, department, Toronto, Ontario. I like to add the city name. Even if you don't add it here, again, as a recruiter, I know, okay, they've overall worked in the Toronto GTA market. I think that's good. So the client relationship manager role, that's a very common role I recruit for in commercial banking. So I just added that in as the example. So January 2019 to current. Some people I've seen, not a lot, but some will put in, for example, the most recent month, even though it's current. So for example, it might say January 2018 till February 2020, and it just doesn't, it makes it sound like they are no longer employed there after February 2020. So you don't want to do that. You want to do current or present, doesn't really matter what word you use, but you want to imply that you are still there. So over here, current experiences, first with the locations, like I said over here, you want to have some detailed info on the deal sizes, portfolio size, increase in revenue, etc. So looking over here, solicited, structured, underwrote, and closed commercial lending deals up to 15 million. Okay, now I know that they've dealt with pretty large credit deals, which is great. And look, it shows me some different sectors that they've worked in. So I have a better idea as a recruiter, that they've worked with various industries, they've worked with clientele in these different groups, which is nice since it's pretty diverse. Okay, managed 60 commercial members, reviewed credits, etc. So, okay, they work with a lot of people internally as well. Okay, managed 70 commercial clients on daily banking transactions. Okay, so they've managed quite a lot of clients. They've dealt with a pretty large portfolio overall. And look over here, increased annual revenue, etc. So just showing that those bit of metrics, again, not just all fully sales, but in terms of portfolio size you've had, maybe different partners. I would have liked, I actually just copied some of these points from other resumes I've seen for the sake of this presentation. And I've had some people, mention that they won, let's say Scotiabank, for example, has different awards, TD has different awards. So saying that they won an award in 2016 for their accomplishments in that particular role and what they did to get there. Some people even mention that they have to build strategy with their COI network. And COI network is something that I've heard is very important in the sales world. I've heard it in the commercial world, I've heard it in the wealth world, as well as some in the retail world. So COI network is the center of influences, which is basically accountants, lawyers, real estate agents, brokers, whoever it is that you could work with to provide you leads. Of course, that could be specific to an industry. Depending on your sales role, you don't necessarily work with those exact individuals. But really, the ultimate purpose of a COI network is, how do you get clients besides sitting at your desk and expecting them to come to you? So building that network and trying to leverage that network. So that's something that's very important that almost all sales role would consider, because there are certain roles, you know, you can't just always sit at your desk. And even if you are, sure, maybe that's part of your role, but no matter what, your manager wants to see you go above and beyond. So how can you do that? Then we have this fake employment that I put in over here, TD Securities, investment banking, Toronto, Ontario. Again, I did a few points here. And this last role over here, what I put is, I didn't add any additional notes over here. And the reason being is just because it's least, I guess, applicable, let's say, for the role I applied to, just for the sake of this example. So if you do have additional experiences that are way back, I made this a 1-page resume. Obviously, I would say you can do 2, depending on how much experience you have. And so if you do find that, you know what, I even have maybe other experiences. I actually worked from, let's say, 2010 till 2014, and I worked, let's say, in different, you know, roles that are not necessarily applicable to the banking role, which is what I'm applying to now. You could always add, you know, additional work experience from 2010 to 2014. So you can always add that in, that you've been in the working world, and you don't necessarily need to elaborate on the roles. So if it was just, you know, you, like, for example, myself, high school, early university, you know, I worked at the mall. I'm not going to add that in if I'm applying to a client relationship manager role. It does not make sense. It's not going to apply for this role, and it's really not going to benefit you. It's just kind of a waste of space, really. So in that case, I would either totally leave that out if I have enough additional work experience to sort of fill up my page. If I didn't, let's say I didn't have this experience over here, I would just put additional work experience from, you know, this date to this date. That's it. There's additional skills and interests. Of course, you can use different titles. Some people just write additional skills, some people write interests, whatever it is. So it really depends on what you want to call it. I just liked it like this. I would put probably, you know, different systems or experiences you have that you might not necessarily have done in your work experience. And it's not exactly an educational aspect, but I would add that in over here. So this individual, again, in my world, it's a lot of people. Ooh, I hope that everyone can hear me. Still saying my internet is unstable, but we have here, just want to make sure, sorry. Yes, okay, perfect. So we have here proficient with capital IQ. That's a system we like to have experience in, Bloomberg, of course, as well, in the different commercial world. I think that's also very common in like an analyst type of role when you're doing a lot of research on different companies, M&A, things like that. I don't think these things are really applicable to other sales roles per se, but really, let's say if you know that there's certain things that are applicable to you in your career, add that in. Let's say you're very proficient with Excel, add that in. In fact, I would have actually recommended adding that into this resume over here. Like I said, I just kind of picked different pieces from different resumes and put it together. So, you know, saying that you're very proficient in Excel, but give a bit of example, because again, everyone can say they're proficient in Excel, but what does that mean? Excel is a whole other world, and it can get very, very deep. So, you know, do you understand the macros with it? What, you know, specific experiences have you had with Excel, would you say? I wouldn't necessarily put Word and PowerPoint. I mean, it's up to you. I just think that it's kind of expected that you know Word and PowerPoint at this point. It's not really an accomplishment. So again, over here, I wrote volunteer at, you know, this is not correct. It's not true for me, but volunteering at, you know, U of T by coaching and mentoring. So just putting in anything additional. Some people like to have a separate section for volunteer. Just because I was limited on space, I just tried to make it a one-pager. I just kept it under this. But it's always great to add in any volunteer or additional. You can even, you just keep it under here, it's totally fine. But putting in what else do you bring to the table? That's not necessarily your specific work experience. What do you do out of the role that makes you a good fit? And it doesn't have to be something so applicable. I did, this sounds obviously a lot more applicable because it looks like the role that I'm applying to may require more of an accounting background, which a lot of my commercial roles do. So that's why I put that in. But even if you're volunteering just, for, like food or like a homeless shelter, whatever it is that you're doing, definitely add that in. It just shows that, you're trying to be involved. Let's say we're part of, those marathons for cancer research, whatever it is, you can definitely add that in. It's nice to see that bit of, the human aspect as well. So there's that too. Like I said, it's just a one pager I put for us. Definitely, if you have a lot more years of experience, I would recommend, 2 pages depending on. Again, starting off with more points for the most recent roles and less points for the ones further out, unless you think that there are particular points in those roles that is very applicable. Then in that case, I would put like a 1 point for each of the other experiences that are towards the end. We just keep in mind, honestly, recruiters go through hundreds of resumes. So really for yours to stand out, I know they like, these cool features and this and that. In my experience, it's ultimately about your experience. That is really what is going to get you to the next point, is your experience. And of course your education too, seeing, okay, has this person gone above and beyond? Again, depending on the role, right? So certain sales roles that are a bit more junior, they want to see overall sales experience in the past. What had they done? Had they done door-to-door sales? Had they done phone calls, had they done cold calls, sorry. That is a huge piece for a lot of sales roles, because they want to know, okay, if this person did cold calling, we know they're not afraid of rejection, because we all know cold calls reject, if it's probably like a 90% rejection rate for all I know. So, but overall, that ability to go above and beyond, put in that piece, I would always add, if you do have experience in cold calling, definitely add that in. But whatever it is, whatever you think is most applicable, put that in your resume over here. And we'll move on to the next one. So some of the common challenges. So let's say you don't have Canadian experience, quote unquote, what do I do? I would say the most important thing is, honestly, speak to people in the industry that you want to get into, because that goes a really, really long way. That's when you'll learn. Canada's so diverse now, so that's when you'll learn, okay, is this an industry I can get into with my international experience, or is this an industry that they're going to need me to really be well-versed in the GTA market, right? So, for example, if you want to get into the branch world, or you want to get into the investment world, you might need to get your Canadian securities courses or the IFIC. There's different courses, certifications, or educational aspects that you might need to get involved in to build a career here. I love seeing someone that is new to the country and they have, let's say, a lot of great experience from their home country and a good background, educational background from there as well, but they've enrolled themselves in some type of educational course or program over here. That really goes a long way, especially if, it's really to help bridge that gap between the differences between, let's say, another country's banking world versus this, Canada's banking world. I know I'm very specific to the banking world for my examples here, but please try to, pick whatever you think is most applicable. But it's really just more for the sake of the example. And also, so the next point here, you have transferable skills from your past experience. So get involved in the areas that kind of help build that Canadian piece as well. So like I said, volunteering in an applicable role, get involved in different industry events. Honestly, there are so many events that happen across Canada, across Ontario, across GTA, probably more so in GTA, but really get involved as much as you can. There's so many things you can volunteer for. And yes, it might sound like a little bit of a waste of time efforts because you're like, I'm just trying to get a job. You're trying to put all your energy towards that, but it's something you can add to your resume. And it, again, shows that you're willing to put in that effort to build that Canadian experience. Of course, employers aren't supposed to be biased against someone who has Canadian experience versus non-Canadian experience. But in my personal experience, it's very hard for anyone. So I'll give you an example. If we're hiring a sales role in Mississauga and there's someone that moves from Edmonton, I'm probably it's going to be hard for that person to take on that Mississauga role, because I'm looking for someone that's already established their network in the Mississauga and GTA area, let alone someone from a different country, right? So that's where it's not necessarily a bias. It's really just, we need someone that's well-versed in this market. So what can you do to get well-versed in that market? If you know that the industry you want to get into requires you to have that COI network, start building those. And yes, you know, it's going to be hard to build that, because what are you really offering them, and, you know, what are they offering you? But build those connections overall. That will go a long way. Try to, like I said, volunteer for different areas that you could, you know, get involved in. If you know that there's a particular group, even for example, ACCES, if you know there's something in there you can, you know, volunteer for to get, you know, a bit more experience in a specific area, definitely do it. Whatever it is, volunteer, get involved, do what you can. If there's different industry events, go to those. So the next point here is, I keep getting rejected. What do I do? So I would recommend looking at, okay, what stage are you being declined? So let's say you look online, you apply for the job online. Did you get declined after the online application? Did you have a phone interview and then get declined? Did you go in person and then get declined? You know, each stage says something. So online application, if you got rejected there, it could be your experience, it could be your resume, it could be, honestly, a lot of the roles are very saturated. So you could have, I have roles with 500 applicants, 200 applicants, thousands of applicants. It really just depends. So with that, it's just, the market is tough. And so with that online experience, that might just mean that you might not necessarily have the particular experience they are looking for. If it's after a phone interview, I would always recommend, let's say you got declined, always try to reach out to the recruiter to discuss, you know, different areas that you could have improved on, or again, was it more of an experience thing, right? So whatever it is that they can assist with. Sometimes I've had people reach out to me for a phone call to discuss it. Sometimes I've had people ask me just via email. I would recommend reaching out and asking the recruiter that if they do have time to chat on the phone, that would be great. But if they are on a time crunch, if they don't mind just responding to the email with some, you know, words of advice, that's great too. Obviously, everyone's busy in their own world, so just trying to get as much feedback as you can one way or another, that goes a long way. Let's say you went in for an in-person interview, that's fantastic, right? That sounds like you had the right experience. Okay, now in person, what happened there? Did they ask you certain questions and you feel like your answers were good, but you don't know what happened? Again, reach out, always send thank you notes after a phone interview or an in-person interview. Ask for feedback if you don't get the role. Try to discuss it. If they tell you know what, everything was great, honestly, you were top 3 or top 2, you have a good idea that, okay, you do have what it takes. It's just, you know, the matter of to keep trying. If they don't get, and a lot of people might not get back to you. So just putting in that effort, trying to get as much information you can, that goes a really long way. If it's after an in-person interview, and assuming they tell you, hey, you know what, we are looking for XYZ, at least you know now, right? So take it as much as you can, try to see what it is you can do to go around that. If it was just like a one-off feedback, everyone else is giving overall better feedback, you know, you just take it as you can. Some roles, like I said, require very specific experiences, and being in that particular geographical area can make a difference. So like I said, if I'm hiring for a senior role, a senior manager level or whatever it is, I'm expecting them to have a lot more experience and obviously more of a junior role. So really making sure that, for myself, I would look at someone, okay, they really had to have established themselves in, let's say, that Markham area, right? Because that's what's going to take them to the next level. So, you know, what if it's, when you apply, it could be that because your experience is not from this area, let's say from the GT or whatever it is, it can be tough because maybe the role you're applying for does sort of require that particular experience. And also, just what are your expectations of the role? When you did the online application, did it ask you for salary expectations? Were your expectations too high, too low? Whatever it is, because sometimes, I mean, at least for our online applications, we do ask for what your salary expectations are. We've had people to have very high salary expectations, and it just doesn't make sense. So being mindful, and I know there's a common thought, and I thought this before too, is that if whatever I select, they're probably going to give me something less. So try to select something a bit higher. I disagree with that totally now. Truthfully, what it is because recruiters receive so many applications, be mindful, be realistic. Regardless, that's just an online application. If you're selecting purposely 90 to 100,000, but you know that role is probably going to give you 60,000. Just be honest about it, because you just want to be mindful for the role. You have to, like I said, that's why you want to talk to people in the industry and get some idea. Maybe you really think that that's what the role offers you, but you really haven't chatted with people in the industry to get a better idea of what kind of salary these roles offer. Because for example, in the commercial banking world, depending on, obviously each bank is slightly different in terms of their base versus incentive, et cetera, but everyone kind of has a general idea of what the market salary is. So you want to do the same thing. Try to get a better idea of the expectations. A lot of people I've seen that are new to the country and they accept slightly more junior role, and they're okay and they're aware of that, and they had a better idea of what salary to ask for versus someone that maybe had very, very high expectations, right? So, and that kind of leads me to my next point. Should I accept a more junior position? So I would say it really depends on the role in the industry you're in. The market will essentially decide for you. So of course, apply for what you think is most relevant to your experience, what it is you want to get into, and ultimately based on the feedback or the responses you're getting, obviously you have to adjust. So if you know you are getting those responses, amazing, obviously go for it. If you aren't really getting too much feedback, you don't really know, but you're still applying, kind of set your own timelines on, okay, I'm going to keep trying this, particular group first. I'm going to try these types of roles first. And if you're not getting the response you're hoping for, think back, plan it out again, chat with more people in the industry, or, whichever mentors or potential individuals, that are friends or whoever it is you can reach out to, try to get some more insights on, okay, what can you do to sort of reshuffle a bit and go from there. So do's and don'ts. I know we talked about a few of these points beforehand, but just going over it again, just really ensuring all job titles, dates, and experience is accurate. You don't want to try to fluff up too much. I mean, I get it. You try to put in your best foot forward. But if you weren't a people manager, don't say you were a people manager, right? So just being open and honest again with this, really making sure the dates are correct, making sure your experience is correct. And actually that kind of ties in with those online applications. If they ask you, do you have experience with XYZ? Don't just click yes. Be honest with that, because it really bothers me. I've had a lot of people where I needed specifically French for the role and they hit yes, and specifically they wrote they were intermediate, whatever it is, and I chat with them, they were actually very basic in French. So that's where it can be really tough, because it's a waste of time for both people. It's a waste of time for the recruiter, because obviously that's not what they're looking for, and it's a waste of time for the candidate because they're not going to be selected for the role. And then no spelling or grammatical errors. Like I told you, I had that additional tool to help. I don't just rely on Word, because Word is more, I think, spelling in a few, other areas, but try to use other tools to really help make sure that the flow is really good. Ask for, your friends, family, whoever it is that you trust that can provide you some good insight, someone who's really good with, maybe writing essays, whatever it is. Ask them to read it over. It goes a long way. It's always nice to get additional insights regardless, right? So, and if you choose to change it or not, always, ask around. It goes a long way. Like I said, don't add additional personal information. Like I said, the beauty of our job market is to not be biased, right? So we don't need to put in our family status. I don't need to put in that I'm a female, or what my background is, whatever the case is. You don't put in anything additional that you don't need to. Again, they want to focus on your experience and your work. That is what's most important. And so this is a really big thing that I think a lot of people, especially when they're new to the country, because they're applying for different roles, most of our systems, and not just Scotiabank, but other systems I've worked with as well in other companies, a recruiter can see all the roles you've applied to. So if let's say, have a candidate named Sarah and she applied to one of my roles and I click her name, I can see all of the applications she submitted online. So I have people that apply to 50, 100, thousands of applications, and it's not a good look. so there's a flip side to that, and I see why people do it, because they probably think that the more I apply, the more chances are a recruiter will look at it. I get that, but you want to just be mindful of the roles you're applying to. So if I see someone has applied to all different types of roles that just don't make sense, they're applying for an admin assistant role, but then they're also applying for a senior client relationship manager. Like, it's just, it looks like the person is just too desperate and they're applying to anything and everything, and it looks like they don't really have a vision for what they actually want to do. So yes, apply to the roles, but be mindful of what is your experience like and what types of roles you specifically want to get into. It doesn't mean only apply to one or two. Just be mindful that whoever clicks on your application, they can also likely see all the other roles you applied to. So I see someone apply for a customer rep role, but then they also apply to a director role. Doesn't make sense. So like I said, they will likely see everything you have applied to in the past in that particular company or system. Also, keep multiple versions of your resume that are applicable to different types of roles. So if you are applying for sales roles, obviously you have a template for that. If you have a template for, let's say, some non-sales roles, or some templates for specifically bank, specifically for retail world, whatever it is, try to keep that, because you want to adjust some of your points accordingly as well. So like I said, think from the recruiter perspective. If they want to hire a salesperson, they want to see numbers, metrics, really show that they have a proven ability. How did you get your clients? What strategy did you put in place? And like I said, don't add unrelated experience. Add a section that says additional experiences with the respective timeline. And just some additional quick tips. I know, sorry guys, that it wasn't all just specific to a resume. I really hope I went over that for you guys, but don't forget that recruiters go over hundreds of thousands of resumes. You are competing with numerous others, and the process can take time. Like I said, I know there's all these tips and tricks about making your resume stand out. The root of it all is your experience. So I think that's what's most important. Also, make sure your LinkedIn profile is strong. So don't be afraid to connect and reach out to people. In the end, if they don't respond, they don't respond, but there's no harm in trying to reach out. But just be mindful. You don't want to keep following up too much if someone doesn't reply to you. You don't want to harass anybody, but just putting in that, one reach out, and then if they don't respond for a couple of days, send one last follow up, and that's it. And the next part, a small typo on a resume really shows lack of attention to detail, so I really don't want to make that mistake. I've had some people, the first thing I looked at was a typo, and it just turns me off, because how can I put them in a role that might require a strong attention to detail, and they can't even look at their resume right. Also, this is actually something I added in just before our presentation. Ensure your email address is professional. I think that a lot of people, they might have some personal email addresses from the past, but also I think it's always important to have like a clean cut email address, first name, last name. I recommend using Gmail. I think I know it sounds kind of silly, like, oh, someone has Yahoo, this and that. Sure. My own personal preference, I always recommend people having a professional Gmail account. I think that also goes a long way. And ultimately, it's all about networking when it comes to your job search. Yes, a resume is important. Yes, a resume, will also help you get the job, but you really need to build your brand. And if you want a career in sales, it's all about relationships anyway. So it's all about who trying to build that. You want to build your brand. And in my own career, a lot of it came from, my sister knew someone and connected me to them, or I reached out to somebody and they actually responded, and I chatted with them. Go to those events. Like I said, reach out to people, don't be shy. In most of my roles, it's all referrals, in a lot of them. And you have to keep in mind, GTA is obviously very saturated in general. I don't know if you guys are calling in from different areas of Canada, but as you probably know, depending on your geographical location, certain areas are very saturated. So, they're gonna get thousands of resumes. Okay, so what do you do to stand out? You have to reach out to these people, build those relationships as well. So that's my end to that. And I guess we'll open it up to Q&A. Sonia, I think I'll pass it over to you if I'm not mistaken.
Thank you so much, Hannah. So everyone, you can start typing in your questions. We already have a few here. So please don't put it into the chat. Put your questions into the Q&A tab. And the first question here is from Ren saying, adding dates to education programs, could that trigger age biases? Do you think it's important to put dates for education?
So that's actually a great question. So for that one there, I would say that that's totally fine. I don't think it's mandatory. I think that just put in your education and it was completed, I guess. I mean, you don't have to say it was completed because we're just going to assume that. But yeah, I mean, put in if you have an MBA, if you have an undergrad, if you did additional certifications, not mandatory. If you feel like, you know what, you don't want to have that bias, if you feel more comfortable not putting in, I would say it's not a big deal to me. I don't know if other employers feel like they need a particular date. I don't think it's necessary.
Thank you. And does mentioning the location or city next to each experience, would that help immigrants when they're applying for jobs? Because it doesn't show any local experience.
So to be honest with you, with my world, when I recruit, because a lot of my roles do require more of having that network established in GTA, it's hard for me as a recruiter to see, okay, this person has, you know, if they don't put in a location, I'm kind of guessing, and that's fine. I don't think you have to necessarily put in that. I think it's just beneficial as a whole, because just to put in the country, if you did have that experience from another country, I get, again, it really depends on what you think and what's more comfortable. I don't think there's an issue, because no matter what, even if they see your resume, they're going to call you. Let's say if they do like your experience and they call you. And so if they chat with you and they learn, okay, your experience is from, you know, a different country, is that going to make or break your candidacy? I don't know. So whether it stops at the resume part or if it stops in the phone interview part, if you feel like, you know what, I want to kind of test it out and not put in a location, see if you're getting calls. And maybe it is the location piece and you need to build more on that Canadian experience then. So see what works for you.
Thank you. And how many bullets are appropriate for each work experience section?
I would say it depends on how many pages. Please don't exceed too many pages. I've had people have like 5-6 pages. Don't do that. If you have less experience, try to keep it to 1. If you have quite a bit of experience, I would say 2 pages max is usually best. I wouldn't even go with 3, to be honest. But based on that, again, the most points I would put is probably like 5-6 at the most recent role, and then kind of decrease from that.
Thank you. And is it as advisable for a person to streamline his or her resume for someone with a broad-based experience?
Yes, I would say that would be good. I would say, again, having those different versions of resumes would help in that situation, because if you do have a lot of great experience in different areas, excuse me, it would be good, depending on the role you apply to sort of adjust the key points. Like I said, if you apply to a role where some of your past experience is more applicable, focus a little bit more on that.
Thank you. And how would you deal with a gap in work experience? So let's say if someone's not working for 4 years, how would you put that on your resume? How can you explain that? How can you, I guess, not hide it, but I guess like camouflage into the resume?
Yeah. So I think that's a really great question. I think that's something a lot of women face, especially if they go on a mat leave and they, you know, take care of their children. And of course that could be for men, depending on certain situations as well. It doesn't always have to be the family situation, but I think it depends on when and where that gap was. So obviously as recruiters, we look at the dates. If I see someone with a gap, I'm going to ask about it. So I think that if it's a situation where it's more current, let's say you haven't been employed for a while and you're applying for jobs, I think that's where it's important to have a good cover letter. So I would write that in the cover letter as to why you don't have you haven't been employed for the last year or 2 years, whatever the case is, and discuss that there. I think that's where the cover letter comes into play. If you do want to put on your resume, you can, again, I would just put in your most recent experience, that's it. And maybe a little subject line in the resume in terms of, what your goal or target is. I would probably actually leave that part out. I would just keep it in the cover letter. I think the cover letter does a good part in kind of giving you that explanation. Because even if I, for example, have somebody apply from Montreal and they will apply for a job in Toronto, I'm kind of wondering, why did they apply to a Toronto role? That's where I look at their cover letter, and sometimes they state there that they are actually planning to move to Toronto regardless, and that's why they're applying. So I would use the cover letter for that.
Perfect, thank you. And what are your thoughts, or what are the expectations of people who are waiting for recruiters or hiring managers to get back to them after an interview? Are they supposed to, is the expectation to hear back from them, or they just don't say anything after an interview?
That's a great question. So I would say that they are supposed to give you some type of update. Sometimes people are receiving an automatic, like an email update that they have not been selected or whatever the case is. Regardless, you should have some type of update. Now, each company has their own policy and procedure. I don't know. I would recommend, like I said, if you don't hear back, reach out once, max twice. In the end, if they're not responding back to you, don't waste your time on that. They're not putting in that effort with you. So I would always recommend reaching out once or twice.
Thank you. And next question here is it possible to put just the year of the start and end of a role, or would you expect people to put the exact dates or months?
I prefer month and year, and the reason being is because when I do hire somebody, our background checks require the month and the year. So just to make sure it's all aligned, that's why I like that. Is it mandatory? No, I would just recommend then putting in the years.
Thank you. And let's say someone's just doing a quick survival job in Canada, and that's the only local experience that they have. Do you recommend them putting that on their resume?
That's a really great question. I would say that can be tough because some people take a survival job that has nothing to do with what they're trying to get into, and that's where it can be really tough because you kind of set yourself back a little bit, because that's what a lot of employers will just see in their eyes, even if you put all that other experience there. So what I would recommend, let's say if you are trying to get into a sales type of career, whatever it is, whether it's with a bank or this or that, try to get at least that common element of sales in your, quick, survival job. So try to do that. It depends, I would say, depending on the role. I would say yes, put it if you think that there's still some of those transferable skills. But I would say don't put it in. But again, then you have to be mindful of, you're going to show that gap of experience. But if you think that that past experience is definitely more applicable, and once you do have that phone call conversation, you can let them know that, you are currently working elsewhere. And it's just, again, for the sake of, making ends meet. And I've had those conversations with individuals, and I respect that.
Thank you. And a lot of people are asking if they can get a recording of the webinar. Yes, so you will get a recording of the webinar in a few hours or maybe tomorrow. If you want to watch it again or share it, so you will get a recording for sure. All right, next question here is, okay, so if someone has, let's say, 14 plus years of experience and they're applying for a job that requires over 5 years of experience, is that okay? Is it,
yeah.
should you not mention 14 years of experience? Should you only mention 5 years of experience?
So that's actually a great point, because this actually ties into something I just saw on LinkedIn the other day. So I know a common challenge can also be when someone is very senior in terms of experience. They have a lot of years of experience under their belt from another country. They moved to Canada, and they're kind of struggling between, you're too senior for this job, but then you don't have enough Canadian experience for this senior role over here. So I think it really depends again, on the role that you apply to. But what I would say then is, it's kind of tough because of the role, but what I would say is maybe, again, shorten, like how I said, on the resume, and then put in additional experiences from this year to this year. maybe do it like that, because again, you don't want to look too senior where they're like, okay, this guy's not gonna, or girl's not gonna last in this role. They're gonna, want to leave. This is too junior for them. You definitely don't want that. But again, maybe add in the cover letter that, I do have 15 years of experience, but I am trying to establish myself in Canada. I'm willing to, take on a new opportunity to establish myself over here. So put that part in the cover letter. That might be more useful.
Thank you. And let's say someone has been a business owner outside of Canada, and once that they move to Canada, they're looking for jobs in finance or banking. How can they show that on their resume?
So absolutely, put in that you're a business owner, put in your business title, put in that you were the owner, put in the key highlights of what you did in that business. I think that goes a really long way. I think having your own business is very a strong experience. So don't be shy to explain that on the resume. And again, putting in, let's say if you're applying for more accounting type roles, put in, the different accounting aspects that you submitted, for your old business. How much revenue did you have? How much profit did you have? Things like that, the different aspects that you think is most applicable.
Thank you. So this is a good question here. What are your thoughts about opening statements like an objective or a career profile?
So sorry, so opening like just having that on the top of the resume, like at
like an objective statement or something, what do you think people should put there? Should they even put something there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's no harm done. I think that you just want to be mindful, because I've seen a lot of people, they have an objective that doesn't actually apply to the role they applied to. So just making sure you're being very specific. I've had some, because again, I know obviously we all know if you're job searching, you're applying to a lot of different roles. Absolutely, put it in. There's definitely no harm in that. That's where maybe someone like who has a lot of those years of experience from another country can put in that they have 15 years of experience or establishing themselves in Canada, and my goal is to start my career here, with whatever it is, XYZ. So absolutely, you definitely can. There's definitely no harm with that.
Thank you. What is the best way to deal with being overqualified for jobs?
So I think it would depend on, are you being declined from the online application? Are you being declined after the phone call?
After interviews.
After the interview. Okay, so what I would actually, the way I would dodge that, or sorry, not dodge that, the way I would handle that, when you do go in person, whether it's an in-person or over the phone, just kind of, we all know there's an elephant in the room. Let's say if you know that this role is too junior considering your experience, if you think this is something that the employer is kind of worried about, just state it. Be like, I do have a lot of these years of experience, and I understand that this role is, something I've definitely dealt with in the past, but this is something I want to be a part of. I really want to set my ground in Canada. This is something I'm really passionate about. Whatever it is, I would say just, say it head on. Honestly, don't try to sweep it under the rug. At least that's what I think. I like it when someone's open and honest, like, hey, you know what, I had this gap of employment, and this is why I had the gap of employment. So whatever it is that you think there's sort of that elephant in the room when it comes to your resume or experience, because if you know that that's what the employer is kind of thinking, but they haven't brought it up yet, or they didn't really exactly bring it up to you, I would say just, face it head on and be honest.
Thank you. I'm just reading through the questions. Some of them have already been answered. So how do employers hire recruiters? Like, how can people who are looking for jobs find recruiters? Like, is just LinkedIn, Indeed good enough, or should they reach out to different agencies? What's the best way to go about this?
So that's a great question, because I get messages. So you have to remember, recruiters, they all recruit for different things. So yes, I'm a recruiter with Scotiabank, but Scotiabank is huge. So somebody reaches out to me for an AML, anti-money laundering role, I don't deal with that group. So you want to be mindful when you do find somebody on LinkedIn, try to look at what do they actually recruit for, because they're likely not going to respond to you, because they're not going to put in that time when they know they can't really help you in that particular field or area. So yes, I think our government does a really good job with providing additional resources to help people with their job searches. Obviously, ACCESS is a great group as well. So definitely do your part to reach out to recruiters, to agencies, to get that and I think a lot of people actually I know that were new to the country went to agencies. I don't know specific agencies per se, but I know they have gone to them, and they definitely do get jobs. Again, sometimes they might be more of those survival jobs, but regardless, you know, depending on your situation, it might still be good for the time being. So yes, absolutely reach out. LinkedIn, I don't think Indeed will show you recruiters. I think LinkedIn would be the best way.
Okay, thank you. Is it wise to apply for jobs from outside of Canada with their like local phone number from outside of Canada with an Airbnb address that they will be, I guess, flying into?
So that's a great question. I would say you definitely don't want to put in, like, let's say whichever other country you're from, because we would all prefer, let's say if things do get to that in-person interview stage, they're kind of expecting you to be here, right? So I would say, yeah, put in the address that, you know, you will be staying in Canada. But again, maybe add that piece in the cover letter that you are planning to move to Canada by, let's say, you know, March 2020, whatever the case is. So add that piece in, because again, you don't want to be too dishonest. I've had some people put in their Canadian addresses and phone numbers, and when I call them, they're in a different country, and sorry, they're not, because I obviously have a Canadian number, but maybe it was through their like an online phone that they have, which gives them the Canadian phone number. So just being honest about it. But yeah, I would say put in the Canadian address if you know you're going to be there soon. There's no harm in that.
Awesome. And oops, where did it go? How can they beat the ATS basically?
So you would expect Scotiabank to have this amazing ATS, but we don't. So I think it really depends on the system. I know there's people that say you have to have those particular keywords, this and that, and sure, you might. But like I said, it's ultimately your experience, ultimately what it is you have done, that's going to get your resume noticed. And again, being honest in those particular online application questions, if you do come across those, obviously if they're looking for somebody with that's bilingual in French, you know, be honest about that, whatever it is, so that, you know, ultimately the way to beat the ATS are really isn't besides your experience. That's the way I see it, because even if I did have an advanced ATS that automatically has that AI of putting the strongest resumes on top, it's likely, I'm sure, with some keywords and particular experiences. So that's really the best way.
Awesome, thank you so much. So I think that we've gone over all of the questions, and we are towards the end of our presentation as well. So Anna, is there anything you'd like to add before I move forward to my slides?
No, I think I covered as much as I could. And of course, Sonia, I'll leave it to you in terms of if they had any additional questions, they can reach out to you and we can kind of connect from there.
Yes, so if anyone else has any questions, you can email them to us, and I'll take them from there. And I'm just going to, just give me 1 second. I'm going to share my slides here, just to, oops, sorry, 1 second.
No worries.
Okay. And are you still sharing? I don't
No, I removed my sharing.
Oh, okay. There we go. Okay, awesome. So yes, like Anna said, if you have any questions, please email us and we will get, I can forward them to Anna. And also, if you have any questions, we do have a lot of resources on our website as well. So if you have any questions, again, about resumes, interviews, other job search tips, go on our website, click on ACCES. You can check out other, all these tiles, and they've got past webinars, blogs, videos, so check them out. There's even some games on there as well that will help you with your job search. Our next webinar is on Wednesdays, called Making Sense of Coffee Chats. So basically talking about how to you know, build your network, meeting people in your same profession, you know, how to get them out of their office and talk to you. So it's a great webinar. We've done that before as well, and Anubhav is coming back with some new ideas. So we're looking forward to that as well. And if you are, if you have your COPR and you're on your way to Canada within the next few months, and you fall under any of these sectors, you can email cec@accessemployment.ca and see if you're eligible to take the pre-arrival program so they can start helping you with your job search before you arrive in Canada. And we are very active on our social media, so if you'd like to know what's happening at ACCES, whether it's on site, whether it's online or off-site, we always post it on our social media. So follow us on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. And again, I'd like to thank Anna so much for an amazing webinar. She was so passionate about this and she did such a great job. So thank you so much, Anna. We're very happy to have you on board. And I hope we can have you back again soon sometime.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. I hope it was beneficial for everyone, and honestly, even any feedback, that would be great. But yeah, no, it was great. And I hope you guys really found, some good tips and, feel like you really learned something from this webinar.
100%, for sure. Thank you so much, Anna, and thank you all for watching today. And yes, you will get a recording. If not today, maybe tomorrow you will. So thank you all and have a great day ahead.
Thank you.